Hey everyone, Tuesday's episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Wes Uhler from Steelers Nation Radio back on the show. We're going to talk about play action and why it became less of a part of the Steelers offense in the most crucial part of the season and how that might have played a big role in their 5-game losing streak. We'll talk about that, get some more grades and answer questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. As I said, we're going to be joined by Wes Uhler, and we're going to be talking a lot about play action passes and what happened in Arthur Smith's offense. Here's my conversation with Wes Uhler on that topic. Hey everyone, we're getting things started here. As I said, we got Wes Uhler from Steelers Nation Radio in. He's back. We used to do Wednesdays with Wes. I need to get that going back again a lot more. But during the season, this man's a two-time father, and he is a Steelers Nation Radio host. So this man's extremely busy. So we don't always get to link up, but we love having Wes. Wes, welcome back to the show.
What's going on, Chris? Yeah, good to be back. I know I have been, I've been owing you for a while because you are kind enough to join Moats and I on the Steelers Blitz every week. So, yeah, this can breathe a little bit more this time of year, and I'm happy to be jumping right into it, baby. Let's do it.
Let's do it indeed. One thing I want to cover with you on this Tuesday episode is also for again, as I've said for the past several days, I'm on vacation, so this episode is being literally recorded on Wednesday of the previous week. So if there's something that happens in this show that is not discussed, please understand that is why. So we are recording this way in advance so that y'all can have content even while I'm on vacation. But I wanted to talk about something that I was looking at in the Steelers offense that changed throughout the season, and particularly during the losing streak that was supposed to be a major facet of the Steelers offense and then wasn't. And that was the usage of play action. When you go back though on the season, on the whole, if you looked at 2024, the Steelers ranked like right in the middle of the league in how often they used play action. 15th in overall snaps, 16th in passes attempted, because there's also getting sacked and run it, just you turning those turning into scrambles. 19th in completions, 26th in net yards, but that could be here or there. But when I looked at it, those middle of the road numbers don't match up with how they looked through the first 2/3 of the season. When you look at the 6 games under Justin Fields, they had the 11th most snaps, the 11th most attempts, the 16th most completions. But and then when you go to Russell Wilson, you had the 12th most dropbacks, the 12th most attempts, and the 17th most completions. So you were a little bit closer to the top 10. But then when you go to that losing streak where they lost 5 games at the end of the season, you look at specifically that time period, they had the 30th most dropbacks, the 31st most attempts, and the 29th most completions in that stretch. Crazy enough, though, they had the 21st most total net yardage on play action passes. And it makes me wonder, what goes into the drastic change there. Now, we talked with, I believe, Nick Faribault last week about the change that happened, supposedly Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson butting heads about adjustments at the line of scrimmage. But I think that, and sometimes some of these games, I think you can explain like, okay, they couldn't call play action as much when they were down big points, but play action was supposed to be an early and often type of thing for the Steelers offense. And I felt like at parts of the season it was, and then it just fell away. Wes, what do you think was the biggest factor that played into that not being part of the Steelers offense as the season continued?
Yeah, you know what, honestly, Chris, this is a great question and a great topic, and one that I might steal for the Steelers Blitz. So if you hear Moats and I discussing the same thing, just mind your business, all right? Man, I think there's probably obviously a multitude of reasons, but the first thing that comes to the forefront of my mind is it feels like around the same time, and I would have to go back and check this to make sure I'm accurate, but that feels like around the same time that they started struggling to really run the football as well, too. And for whatever reason, I know this is something our buddy Matt Williamson, obviously your Locked On listeners are familiar with him. Like Williamson has preached to me, and I think to all of his listeners for a long time, that there's this fallacy that you have to run the ball well to be a good play action team. And that's not always necessarily the case. It's more the commitment to play action that will yield the results, except for situationally using play action when you're successfully running the ball. And so when you lay out those numbers, I mean, you could see it right there. They went from at least viable, right? If you're in the low teens, if you're close to top 10, that's an all right place to be, to falling back big time. I got to think part of that was because they looked at it and thought, we're not running the football like we want to, so therefore the play action game isn't going to work. And Russ isn't as mobile. If we're asking him to turn his back to the line of scrimmage, all he's really doing is losing time. In their mind, maybe it was hustling backwards at that time. And I'm not saying that I agree with that, but on the surface, that feels like it has to be a big part of it. Najee, Jaylen Warren, not as effective as they want to be. Because of that, let's not risk wasting time and having Russ turn his back to the defense and all these different things, which, again, I'm not saying I agree with that philosophy, but that feels like something we've just seen consistently. Like, man, going back to even the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era, when we have just been for so long, really ever since the end of the Killer Bees era, like discussing how often and how easily this team has gone away from using play action.
I'm right with you. I think that's something in there, and I think it's a very good point that you bring up, that, you know, referencing Matt Williamson. We've had him on the show a number of times. Just about that, you don't need to hit on the run before you hit play action. Teams, I mean, we saw as the season was going along, we talked about how, you know, the Steelers were running right into the teeth of defenses, which is something they had done in years under Matt Canada. But early in the season, when they were finding success, I feel like part of what they were doing right was that they weren't running into the teeth of defenses. But they were hitting them with play action. There were times where they would grind things out, and they would kind of try to wear you down, and that's fine. But it was built off of being able to be efficient in being a play action pass team, and, you know, and getting those passes off, and occasionally hitting on those plays. And you could turn some of those into big plays over the middle, big plays down the sideline, one of those Russell Wilson moon balls. But being able to do that, or backing guys off and hitting the running back underneath, which is something they did against the Bengals really efficiently in the first matchup. And it was just bizarre to go away from that. And I think maybe it is that philosophy, and maybe it's a coaching adjustment that needs to be done for the near future. When the Steelers, if they want to use play action, it doesn't require their run game to be on fire in a game. It just requires them to just be able to say, hey, people know that the Steelers want to run the football. Even when they weren't good at it, people knew that they wanted to do that. So you could still draw the attention of those plays and still get somebody open, or at least create an opportunity, because this was an offense that we knew it wasn't your standard drop back and just launch the ball. It wasn't Joe Burrow, you know, throwing it to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins all season. They needed to find creative ways to get around that. Play action was the weapon that did work for them for the first 2/3 of the season, and they abandoned it in that losing streak. And that needs to be a lesson that everyone, from the coaches to the quarterbacks to everybody, needs to embrace next year and not have happen at any point.
Completely agree. And Chris, I think you touched on something there too. There is no doubt around the league, if you polled all the other 31 defensive coordinators, that they know the Steelers want to run the football. Like, there is the commitment to running the football. I think particularly in early down situations, we all saw the tendencies of runs on first and second down. We all screamed and banged our head off the desk at times about it, right? These teams know that you have the commitment to running the football, so you would think that the belief in your play action is still there. Because even when you aren't running the ball successfully, teams know that that's still a priority. Teams know that you're still attempting. Teams know that the Steelers, even though their yards per attempt were one of the lowest in the league, were still running the ball at one of the highest clips in the league. All of that adds up to, you should be in the top 10 or at least close in terms of your play action usage, pardon me. And listen, like, part of that, I think you're absolutely right. That has to be part of the conversation going forward, and obviously a big part of the conversation of what they're going to do at the quarterback position as well.
Agreed. That needs to be part of all the conversations right now. I think that's something that's going to be discussed. When we come back, we're going to take a question from you guys in the Locked On Steelers hotline about the running back position, because that plays off of it, right? It's also, what do they do at running back? That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Wes Steelers. Stick with us. We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. So even if you missed the first few minutes of the game or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle until the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. FanDuel customers can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older and present in select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, and 18 and up and present DC. First online real money wager, $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Wes Uhler, talking all things Steelers. We head to the phone lines to take your questions on the Locked On Steelers podcast. As always, you can call into the show at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question on in a minute. We'll try to get you on the show. This question does revolve around the run game, which kind of works in concert with the play action pass game. But this question comes from Taylor in North Carolina about the Steelers running back position. Taylor, take it away.
Hey, Chris. Taylor from North Carolina here. Love the show. I just wanted to pick your brain about your thoughts on what we are going to do for running back. Us not signing Najee's 5th year and possibly re-signing Jaylen still leaves us a running back down. Will we go in the draft to get one or in free agency? My personal opinion, I like Cam Scatteraboo from Arizona. I think he'd be a great fit to go along with Jaylen Warren. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate you calling in. As always, you can call in just like Taylor and get your question on the show at 412-223-6644. Again, leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. We'll get you on the show. But Wes, this was something I voiced early in the offseason when they did not give Najee Harris his 5th-year extension. I was like, I don't know if this is the right move, because next year, whatever happened this year, they were probably going to need to make several investments. And if they didn't re-sign Najee Harris, that was going to need to be another part of it. And they could have signed him, I think, for what, $6.5 million was his 5th-year extension, something that was very low in cash costs. And now he's set to hit free agency where he might get a contract of like $10-ish million. So you could have kept him around for not that much and done that. But now you're in this position where either you do find a way to re-sign him, or you go out, you keep Jaylen Warren, who's a restricted free agent, so he's easily going to be back on the Steelers roster for not that expensive, and then you go get a guy. But, I think that's been a big question that Taylor brings up is, how do they replace Najee Harris? Because if you look at the free agent running back class, he might be the best free agent running back in football. Aaron Jones,
J.K. Dobbins.
Got a lot of guys with injury histories and older and not.
There's no Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry this time around. Yeah,
there is not. And so for me, I've been saying this with Nick Farabaugh and Alan Saunders the past couple of weeks. I think it leads to the draft, but I'm not so sure you're going to be able to go get a Cam Scatterbo out of Arizona State. And look, he was fun. He was great in college, but he's probably a 2nd-round pick right now. And your 1st and 2nd-round picks are probably either going wide receiver, corner, D-line, any mix of those. I feel like if you're going running back in this draft class, this is a deep running back class. You can get talented guys. You might have to wait until the 3rd, maybe even the 4th round to go get it. What say you about this approach to this offseason as far as running back?
Yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer here, because I think we all like Jaylen Warren. And if you look at the history of restricted free agents, I mean, 99.9% of the time, they end up staying with the team that has their contract rights. So barring something crazy rare, Jaylen Warren will be a Pittsburgh Steeler with a slight bump in his contract, as they have his RFA rights this offseason. And I think we all like Jaylen Warren, and I think we all know Jaylen Warren is capable. But I also don't think a lot of Steelers fans would sign up for Jaylen Warren and a 4th-round draft pick when the team shows up in Latrobe next year. Like, if you want to be an offense that's going to run the football, and we know that the Steelers want to be an offense that can run the football, you got to show up to training camp with more than Jaylen Warren and a mid-round rookie. Like, you just have to. I also think if I told Steelers fans, you're going to take Ashton Genty from Boise State at pick 21 or something like that, they might lose their minds.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people like Cam Scatteraboo. I think if you told a lot of people the Steelers are going to take him in the 2nd round, they might lose their minds because you can't draft a running back that high. So those are kind of the scales. And with Najee Harris, you're absolutely right. If the number was $6 or $7 million, I think you'd love to have him back at that. If it's $9, $10, $11 million, that might start to get a little too rich for your blood. So there's no easy answer there because, man, Najee to me is such a curious case of what football fans value, right? Because no, he's not a home run hitter, and he's not an explosive guy, and his yards per carry throughout his 4-year career is at 3.97. I mean, it's just under 4. A lot of those things aren't great. But he has also played 17 games for the Pittsburgh Steelers in all 4 years, including 3 playoff games. So since he's been drafted, the Steelers have played 71 football games. He's been on the field for all 71. He has had 1,000 yards in each of the last 4 seasons, the only player in the NFL that has done that 4 years in a row and 3 years in a row. So Najee Harris is not this Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry unicorn of a running back. But Najee Harris's also don't grow out on trees in your backyard and we could just go pluck another one and bring them right in here. You have to find that middle ground. You don't want to overinvest in the running back position, but you also don't want to be left hanging like I think the Steelers maybe were at times in between the Lev Bell and the Najee Harris years, and particularly after that one great year that James Conner had here in Pittsburgh as well, too. So that's the balance for me, Chris. Najee Harris isn't a unicorn, but guys who do what he does also don't grow on trees either. So you don't want to let him walk and use another high-value draft pick. That seems like bad business. You don't want to give him a contract that might be close to double of what you could have had him if you would have just picked up that 5th-year option. That would be bad business. You can't show up to Latrobe with Jaylen Warren and a 3rd or 4th or 5th round pick as your only options at running back. There's no easy answer here, but I think, listen, quarterback, huge priority. We know. Wide receiver and defensive line. But man, like I think running back is shortly on that list, right behind all those things as well, with the type of offense that the Steelers want to be in the questions now that they have in that room.
And listen, the durability was the big reason they went and got Najee Harris, was because you look at the years before then, James Conner, a beloved guy from Pennsylvania, Pitt player, awesome guy, and overcame cancer and everything.
Amazing story.
But the reality was he was he was unavailable for several parts with the Steelers after Le'Veon Bell didn't show up after Le'Veon Bell's final year with the team in 2017. He didn't play more than 13 games in the season with the Steelers. He was often hurt. He started 12 games in 2018, 10 games in 2019, 11 games in 2020. And in no stretch of those games does he get 1,000 yards. Now, he was really good in 2018 filling in for Le'Veon Bell when Le'Veon Bell didn't show up. He had 973 on the ground, 12 rushing touchdowns. Was also helping. He had another receiving touchdown, 497 yards. Looked like he could be the guy, but just health was not on his side. Also, I think the declining age of the Steelers' offensive line kind of lost the luster of that group that was kind of carrying the Steelers through the mid 2010s. That was a big factor in it. And then when he left the Steelers after 2020, he went to the Cardinals. It took him some time before he found his feet there. He was able to get decent yards. He had some big touchdowns in 2021, but again, he only started 6 games that one year. And this is the first time this very last season was the first time in his career he started 16 games in the NFL. That to me is a big part of, or even played in 16 games in the NFL. That to me is a big part of why the Steelers, were moved on. And so when you're asking yourself about Najee Harris, you got to ask yourself, is Jaylen Warren ready to be that kind of a back? We saw him deal with injuries this year and have to miss time. And Jaylen Warren's one tough son of a gun, and I think that he's a heck of a playmaker, and he certainly earned the shot to be a guy that can tote the rock a bit more. But you have to ask yourself, how do you try to kind of help him in giving him someone in the offense that can take on more of the brunt of those carries so that there can be an even distribution where he can keep those fresh legs throughout the season. I think that's a harder question to go there. To your point, if you're looking at early picks, you're looking at Ashton Jeanty, Cam Scatterbo, Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. Maybe if you wanted to go second round, you went for a Dylan Sampson or a Caleb Johnson out of Tennessee and Iowa. There's the duo of Ohio State running backs and Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson. But, do you want a home run hitter? Do you want to try to go for a guy like Devin Neal? But again, you're waiting for that late third, fourth round type of type of back, and that's a push. That's not that's going to leave a big question mark at your running back position when you're supposed to be a running team.
I like a lot of those names that you just mentioned in the draft. I do. I think a lot of those guys can be quality NFL running backs. But I think that, I don't know that. And Chris, Najee Harris had, I think, 299 touches last year. Like, I think it was literally 299, right on the brink of 300. Like, think about it in terms of an NBA equation, right? Like, if you lose your guy who scores, like, you might not think he's a very good shooting guard, but he's scoring you 21 points a night. Okay, if you move on from him, where are you finding those 21 points? If you move on from Najee Harris, that in its own is a fine decision. But where are those 299 touches going to? Because, man, that's a lot of volume that you're losing from the offense. There's not an easy answer right now for the Steelers, but they gotta find that answer and find it quick here.
They do, and I think that's going to be part of the question here is how do they want to find that answer? You're looking at that again, over 1,000 yards rushing every single year he's been with the Steelers. Over 1,200 yards from scrimmage every year he's been with the Steelers. This year was the lowest amount of touchdowns that he had with 6 on the season. He had 8 in 2023 and then 10 in each of his first 2 years with the team. And only 5 fumbles across what was 1,277 touches. That's a pretty remarkable rate of protecting the football. How do the Steelers address that? That's going to be a big question. We'll talk more about that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're going to take a quick break, come back, give you our final running back grades on the season and how they performed. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points and Anthony Davis for more than 12 rebounds. The best part, Prize Picks is quick and easy. You can set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean I get my winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Plus, I love their weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you can get discounted player projections for even better value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue with Wes Uhler here on the show today. Wes, let's get into these final grades. Now, we've been doing these final grades for about a week now, where we tally up all the stars and skulls we did throughout the season. Again, each game, a player got a grade, whether it was a neutral grade of no stars or skulls. But if you got 1 to 3 stars, that's good to elite play. 1 to 3 skulls, bad to terrible play, just based off of that. And what we do for these grades is we tally them throughout the season. How many of those performances weigh out against each other, and then we kind of have a rubric for how we grade those numbers in the game. So there's that as well. Let's start with the guy that saw the least amount of time on the field at the running back position. That was Cordarrelle Patterson. On the season, he didn't play a whole ton at the running back position, but when he did make some plays. He had some impressive plays here and there. He also had some big mistakes, but when I looked at it, there were only like really 2 games that I thought that he was a negative influence on the team. That's why he only got 2 skulls in the season. And overall, like he made enough plays here and there to get 5 stars in the season. 3 more stars and skulls, no bus tickets. That's a C+ in my book in there. And that's kind of what you're going for if you're getting an older third string running back who's supposed to help you there. Now, if you grade him as a pure kick returner, that's a whole different ball game.
Sure.
But to me as a running back, he did the job of the third string guy.
So wait, what's the bus ticket? Is that like an all-time bad performance?
Oh,
like
so
get your butt out of town with a bus ticket.
I do have to. This was an Alan Saunders creation. One time.
I like this. I love this.
It was Marcus Allen who inspired it. He had a terrible game a few years ago for the Steelers, and like not only was terrible, but then like his antics like cost them a serious penalty in a game. And he was like, "That guy don't get 3 skulls; he gets a bus ticket." And we kind of ran with that since then. So there's been a few bus ticket players this year, and we still have some more to come. Cam Sutton got a bus ticket this year. This is like get him out of town. There was another bus ticket for the offensive line. I think we did yesterday with Mike DeFabo. That'll be another. That's another one there. So, but bus tickets are rare though.
Yeah.
You don't just hand those out. That's
got to be real bad. Yeah,
you got to be really bad to be on that level. So no bus tickets for Cordero though.
I think that's fair. Listen, I think it's safe to say that you didn't get the highs that you were hoping to get from Cordero Patterson this year, in a guy who was a little advanced in age, but just such a unique talent in this league, and was familiar with Arthur Smith and everything he was doing. But I'm with you as well, too. Like, with his role, he didn't really crush the Steelers either. There were, again, a couple of those moments where you'd have liked to have seen him make plays. But overall, your season wasn't hanging in the balance based on what Cordero Patterson did every week. So I think that's fair.
There you have it there. Let's move to Jaylen Warren here. And Jaylen Warren's a little tricky because he missed a decent amount of time early in the season. And I feel like that's the only thing that really held him back, because on the season, I only gave him 1 skull. And I think that was one time where he fumbled in the game. But on the season, he had 15 stars. If he had played more, he probably would have had at least 20 plus.
Mm-hmm.
But that 15 to 1 as far as stars to skulls, that's a 14. Difference of 14 there. That's a B+, just on the cusp of being an A-. I mean, Jaylen Warren continues to be the guy in the running back 2 role. He might be the best running back 2 in the NFL. And that's why I think the Steelers might be saying, you know what, maybe we should spin to win and see how he does as running back 1 with a guy that, maybe takes a bigger chunk of his carries than even he took of Najee Harris. Because again, he's a smaller back. You don't want to wear him down by handing him, 500 touches in a season or anything like that. But all in all, I think Jaylen Warren, I don't think he's ever gotten below a B or a B+ on my show.
Yeah, Jaylen Warren is just like, what he is, man. He's like pulling up to McDonald's and seeing the number 1 on the menu. Like, doesn't matter if you're in Pittsburgh, if you're in California, if you're in Texas, if you're somewhere overseas. Maybe Ireland in 2025.
Silly.
You pull up to McDonald's and the same number 1 on the menu everywhere you go. That's Jaylen Warren. Like, each and every week, you know what you're getting with him. I agree with you, Chris. I don't think he quite took off this year like we had hoped, but at the same time, it wasn't like he slumped either. He is explosive. He has the home run hitting ability, and he so rarely has any negative effects, right? I mean, he's so the fumble that he had in against Washington, right? Like, that's such a rare moment because you just never see him do things like that. He's solid in the run game. He's solid in the pass game. He's really underrated in pass protection, although maybe that's kind of like the Aaron Smith thing. We talked about how underrated Aaron Smith was for so long that I don't think Aaron Smith is underrated as a player anymore. I think we've talked about how underrated Jaylen Warren is as a pass protector for so long that it's not underrated anymore. But yeah, I am completely confident with giving him a bigger role in 2025. I just would like to have a running mate with him that I am confident in as well too. I'm not going to be panicked if it's Jaylen Warren and a rookie, but I do think that would obviously be a risk. But man, he is certainly a capable running back, and I'm with you. I think one of the better number 2s, depth options in the NFL, however you want to label it, and certainly deserves a bigger role going forward.
No, I agree with you. I think that you got, if you're Steelers and you want to have a run game, it's a good thing that you have him in your backfield, but it's just, how do you put him, who do you put around him? What are you going to do it? And also, something that I think Najee Harris suffered from in his time with the Steelers is, can you get a better offensive line? The Steelers had 4 years with Najee Harris, and like the offensive line improved from being very bad to being maybe average or slightly below average or slightly above average, depending on the type on the part of the season that you tuned in on them. But to me, I think that's the big challenge here, is that you need to give, if Jaylen Warren's going to be the guy, and you're getting another guy to go with him, you need to have a guy with him. You need to have another guy with him, but you also need an offensive line to develop. And I think if they had done that around Najee Harris, it would have been slightly different for the Steelers. And let's go over Najee Harris in his final grade on the season. I only gave him 4 skulls on the season, but I gave him 22 stars. Again, good enough for a B+ effort there. Not elite by any means, but again, steady and productive and giving you fight there. And even in some of those losses, like some of those stars that he tallied up were in some during that losing streak, like when he would get a pass that would be short of the line of scrimmage and he would fight forward and he would get you some hard, tough yards even while the defense was waiting on him. Like you look at what he was doing at times. He was able to get 41 yards through the air in that playoff game. Sometimes that was the only thing that was working for the Steelers during that stretch. His touchdown against the Bengals was a big thing in the regular season finale. I think he averaged 4.7 yards per carry against the Ravens in the repeat game. He averaged 4.7 yards per carry against the Bengals in the first win. He had several good performances, and I think that the thing that's tough for Najee Harris is that he rarely had those really explosive games because he's not a really explosive player, but he was a guy that was steady, got a workhorse, got you those yards, and was very consistent in doing so. And again, that's why he's like one of 3 running backs in the last 20 years of football to have 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons.
Consistency. I mean, again, you've touched on it. I've touched on it. We know what the criticisms, the knocks on Najee are, and they're valid. I'm not saying that they're not valid, but that is, Najee Harris, and I don't mean this as an insult, but he is a B+ running back. Yeah. That's what I think Najee Harris is. He's not Saquon Barkley. He's not Derrick Henry. He's not Josh Jacobs, but he's also not one of these guys who's fighting and clawing to make a roster spot or anything like that. Now, he belongs as a running back in the National Football League. He is one of the best 15, 16 people in the world at what he does. Make no mistake about that. He, like I said earlier, he's not a unicorn, but he doesn't grow on trees either. And you're right. There were so many times this season that the Steelers offense just had absolutely nothing going on. And other than dumping the ball off to Najee or having him run through the teeth of the defense. And, he at times made chicken scratch out of chicken bleep. You know what I mean? He at times took those lemons and made some lemonade. And with a struggling offense, a offensive line that you mentioned, good at times, down at times, a lot of young players to be expected. I mean, I think Najee handled his business. It was not a valedictorian type performance, you know what I mean? But he wasn't out there dropping C's and D's and F's either. I think B+ is perfect.
I'm right with you. I'm glad you agree. I think some people, they don't like Najee Harris because they've had it out for him since the start. I thought that he's been kind of gotten a lot of flack for a lot of the other problems in the offense. If he is gone from the Steelers, I do think it's going to be interesting to see how much do they miss him. Do they miss him at all? Do they find another talent that fills in that role? Does Jaylen Warren make them forget all about it? Or do Steelers fans end up missing him? That's something we won't find out until next year. But again, I think it's interesting. When I looked at the grades at the end of the season, him and Jaylen Warren got the same grade for different reasons, but again, the same grade. And I think that could be a good sign for the Steelers moving forward if Jaylen Warren is their guy. But Wes, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, Chris, great stuff, man. Enjoyed it. We'll do this again before too much longer. Host the Steelers Blitz with Arthur Moats. We're on at noon on Fox Sports Pittsburgh and Steelers.com, your Steelers mobile app. You can also just Steelers Blitz in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts if you want it on demand and on your schedule. And then for the tortured Mountaineer souls out there, In the Gun is the WVU Sports podcast that I host as well, that Chris is always kind enough to let me chat at.
Absolutely. And, I'll be getting, if there's more WVU prospects in the draft class, who knows? Maybe I'll get y'all some more audio for that show this year
buddy.
if we're hanging around. But hey, he's Wes Uhler. Thanks so much, Wes, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias. Same handle everywhere at Carter Critiques. Read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday here. Talking about your Pittsburgh Steelers. Back here tomorrow with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.